Yesterday, March 21st, 2023, the Washington State House held a committee hearing to discuss a bill, an amendment for mandatory reporting laws. Oh, crap. I already messed up the intro. Ooh, one of these days I'm going to have a good intro. Yesterday, March 21st, 2023, the Washington State House held a committee hearing to discuss a bill, an amendment to which would remove religious exemption for mandatory reporting laws. Jehovah's Witnesses, Catholics, and other religious organizations have historically relied on clergy penitent privilege to bypass mandatory reporting, allowing the cover-up of child sexual abuse. ExJW activists were instrumental in the introduction and wording of this amendment and appeared before the committee yesterday. We have it on video, so we are going to react to that and more all on today's. Welcome to the show, everybody. We are live, although if you are watching this in the far-flung future, I'll put some timestamps in the description. And this is a really, really cool story, an example of how on-the-ground activism, actual activism, not dumb, like, content creation, stuff like I do, but actual on-the-ground activists can work at a local government level and enact real change. And we have an example of that in Washington State. So I'm going to read a little bit of background here because, as I mentioned in the introduction, we had, we, the human race, had a hearing in Washington State yesterday, basically about this amendment and a bill that would mandate churches to report child sexual abuse or neglect, whereas currently they and a lot of other states have loopholes, exemptions for clergy penitent privilege. And clergy penitent privilege is exactly what Watchtower uses to defend their own cover-ups of child sexual abuse. And that's somewhat ironic because clergy is almost exclusively a negative word in Jehovah's Witnesses, but when it suits them, they use it. And that is going to be a theme of the videos we're going to be watching today. All right. To address chat, I don't know. I decided to do the top button, and I don't, it felt right. I do feel like I'm a little bit in the meeting close, but I also feel like, this is an important occasion. We had people who had, never shown their face before in public, show their faces for this committee hearing. It's pretty cool. So yeah, I'm getting dressed up. This is an important stream. And let us also address Ron PIMO, who I can neither confirm nor deny had anything to do with this. He doesn't seem to be aware that Washington is a thing. So that sounds like plausible deniability to me. And so let me pull up here my screen, and we're going to read a little bit about what this law is so we can have some context going into this video, and then I'll explain what the video is, and we'll get into it. So in response, this is from the Oregon Public Broadcasting news section, I believe. In response to Investigate West reporting on Jehovah's Witnesses covering up allegations of sexual assault, Washington state lawmakers introduced a bill last week, whenever this was written, that would make clergy mandatory reporters of child abuse or neglect. Senate Bill 5280 and its companion bill in the state house would make it illegal for clergy not to report sexual abuse allegations to authorities unless the information came in the form of a confession. Currently, Washington is one of a handful of states in the country that do not list clergy as mandatory reporters of child abuse or neglect at all. And I just want to read this last bit. The bill was introduced by Senator Noel Frame, a Democrat from Seattle, who said she was motivated to change the law after reading that report last year, examining alleged sexual assault cover-ups by Jehovah's Witnesses and Washington's relatively weak state laws regarding clergy's reporting requirements. So, all of this emerged from reporting, and this is reporting that was able to happen because of whistleblowers within the organization, abuse victims coming forward, Um, and you can subscribe to Investigate West. Apparently, they love that if you look on the website. So it's just, and already there's been, we're at now the level from there was a report, and now this is something that is going to be potentially passed as law. So pretty cool. We've got some royalty in the chat. Let's get into what this video is. I'll close this out here. So this video is a feed that you can also watch on the Washington State website, like their governmental website, but also Ron PIMO in the chat uploaded it to his YouTube channel. The link to that is in the description in case you just want to watch it without me rambling over it, which is probably preferable. I'm actually going to try not to talk too much or to be, selective in my commentary because it's just really good. And I mostly want more people to get eyes on this because it's a really exciting story, an example of positive change at a local government level. And I find that super inspiring because I don't know. I feel helpless a lot. I like, you don't, once you lose the comfort of, well, Jehovah will sort everything out. I don't have to worry about any of that. Like when you realize that you do have to worry about some stuff and you see how, I don't know, insane the world is, it feels like, oh, we're just screwed and we can't really, nothing we do can really make a difference. And so when you see something like this, it's really cool. So basically, this is a feed of this committee hearing. And what we have here are senators, congresspeople, state lawmakers, I believe a bishop from the Catholic Church, a lobbyist on behalf of religious organizations, and no Watchtower presence at all, which is interesting. So, Jehovah's Witnesses are mentioned explicitly today, obviously, multiple times in this hearing, as we will see, but they don't have a legal presence there themselves. Or I guess legal presence isn't the right word, but like an advocate there on their behalf. Whereas, when you look at stuff like ICSA or the Australian Royal Commission, obviously they did have Watchtower representatives there on their behalf, and they've appeared in court before, these charlatans who they put before the court who lie about stuff like shunning, for example, and say that it's, not mandatory within the religion. But it was weird to me, the fact that the Catholic Church was there, but Watchtower wasn't. And as you'll see, what it felt like to me watching it is that Watchtower kind of outsourced its defense to the Catholic Church. That obviously this is something that would affect them negatively, but they didn't get involved. So Mark O'Donnell is one of the people who we will see on the good guys team, people from the ExJW community, and also somebody from who speaks more to the Catholic side of things, but I think is from a like secular nonprofit. And also on the committee are another person who shall remain nameless, and my little PIMO, who is here in the chat. And if you're a hyper online person in the ExJW space, you've probably seen my little PIMO around. One of the most, I don't know. I love my little PIMO. He's a good fella, and he's been doing incredible on the ground activism that is genuinely inspiring to see. And so we will see his testimony, and this is essentially his face reveal. He's been PIMO. He's still PIMO. He's not, I don't believe, and you can correct the record on this, but not disfellowships currently, but will likely face repercussions because of this. So let's get into this. Also, Jegs in the chat, and Jenny Bloom as well. I believe another Washington State resident. There was something I want. Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I got myself off track with my little PIMO. So Mark O'Donnell is one of the people on this panel. He closes things out. And so I asked him, I sent him a message and asked, like, well, I'll just read it because he said it would be okay if I read it on the stream. I said, I just watched the hearing in Washington and you all did an incredible job. I was wondering if you had any idea why Watchtower didn't have any reps there. It almost felt like they outsourced their defense to the Catholics. And he said, he would say that he says they rely heavily on the Catholic Church, the very church that they have criticized more than any other over the past 100 years. The witnesses don't tend to get involved in political or legislative activism at all. So, yes, you will be seeing that play out throughout this thing, and it's interesting. So, let me pull up my screen here. I'm going to start by showing, the opposition, so to speak. This is a Catholic bishop, and following him, there's this lobbyist who only is referred to by Eric, which weirds me out. I think it's important to hear what their arguments are. So, this guy blathers on and talks about Jesus and scriptures for a long time. I kind of fast forwarded to the end of his section, and there's some question and answers. And it's really interesting, former Washington resident. So I want to correct the record on Jenny Bloom here. So, yeah, let's watch this play out. We'll see some question and answer. You can tell by the questions asked who is on the side of the church in this matter and who is on the side of, children and abuse victims. And it really only seems to be one person who's on the side of the church. So we'll see here.
To make this bill stronger. On the contrary, any such amendment will accomplish nothing and will only serve to undermine the freedom of religion.
Yes, so he is here arguing, to give more context, that that mandating reporting for clergy would basically be an infringement of their religious rights, and that it would be bad for the church, actually. So that's what he's there to do. He's there to protect the clergy penitent privilege exception for mandatory reporting.
To be clear, over history, priests have been martyred and imprisoned for refusing to break the seal of the confessional. For love of our people, we would never.
Yes,
do
he
it.
refers here to
Part,
martyrdom. This is how
attempt to
important
harm
this
the
is.
Privacy and confidentiality of this sacrament would harm the very souls the public servants vow to protect. So please respect the constitutional right of Catholics in our state to come to confession and unburden their hearts without fear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you would be willing to...
Is it still quiet? It is a little quiet on my end. So I had to turn up my headphones. I think it's just the feed itself because I've got it turned up all the way on here. Let me see if I can do anything. I don't think so. Let's play it out, and if it's still too quiet, I can try pulling it up on the Washington government website and see if it's a little better. Okay, so that's, I think it's just the original video. You should be able to, we'll figure it out. Maybe I'll talk quieter. So I'm as quiet as them, and then you can turn your phone up, and it's not like I'm screaming at you.
Take a question or two?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Representative Couture.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Bishop. You mentioned the charter and how some of the priests in your organization you already consider yourselves mandatory reporters.
Yeah.
Have there been instances where priests in your organization had to report child?
Okay, so the reason why I want to play this is because these are Watchtower's arguments. They feel comfortable enough letting the Catholic Church handle this on their behalf. And if you've ever heard Watchtower argue in behalf of, clergy penitent privilege, you'll know that these are the kind of arguments that they use. And what he's referring to is earlier in Catholic Guy's spiel, he was like, we do report. We do report stuff, just not in a confessional setting. But he doesn't make that clear. But he basically makes it seem like, well, no, it's not, it's not the law, but we already do but introducing this law would be bad for some reason. So they kind of call him out on this during the questioning.
Child abuse to the authorities.
Well,
In your organization had to report child abuse to the authorities.
well, certainly. In fact, I can share with you that I am a priest that did that. Something came during a pastoral counseling situation
a medal.
that I knew I needed to report, and I did. I filed a police report, and I dare say we saved a child that day. And I know other priests have done the same thing. You know, talking
Wow.
to Human Resources, Matt Boswell at the Archdiocese.
This is a child saver.
that he
This is a
told,
savior of
for
children.
priests, to report. So yes, we take that very seriously. Our whole safe environment program, training, and everything's available for you to review at archseattle.org. So this is something that we do.
Follow up, Representative Couture.
Comment on the screen here is a good
Thank you,
encapsulation
Madam
of his
Chair.
argument.
To your knowledge, is there any other state that does this? What might be proposed to do with the amendment as we passed it, or as we passed out of committee in the House, eliminating the confession piece?
Oh, to be honest with you, thanks for the question. I've been a bishop for like 9 months, and so I'm still a baby bishop, as we call ourselves, and so I'm still trying to.
It's really frustrating how he plays the crowd too. Like, and you know, the committee, obviously, he's making jokes, makes them laugh. He goes even more Ken Ham on it a little later on.
So I'm not aware of. I've only been to a couple of the meetings and all the rest. So I'm not aware of what's going on other places. But I'm a pretty good resource for here in the Archdiocese of Seattle and also here in the state of Washington. So.
Thank you, Bishop. Representative Ortiz.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Agreed.
Hello, Bishop. So help me understand. I think I might be misunderstanding. So on one hand, I think I heard that the priests are already mandatory reporters,
Yes.
but legally they're not.
Outside of the confession, yeah, we're mandatory reporters.
So outside of the confession, you're mandatory reporter. You want to keep the confession.
He gets caught here.
Separate from the outside of the confession.
Yes,
Okay, now I
yeah.
understand what you're saying. So when you made the report, it wasn't something you received in confession.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. It was in a pastoral setting, but we needed to take action.
Okay.
But we needed to take it. So this is insane, right? Because what he's essentially arguing for when he saved a child that day is that if it just so happens that this person told it to him during confession, then he wouldn't have filed the police report because it would have been, you know, private clergy penitent privilege. So yeah, this is what big hero baby bishop is saying, that he's a amazing hero for saving a child, but it's kind of lucky that the guy happened to spill his guts to him outside of the confession booth, because it was only because it was in a pastoral setting that he was able to report it.
For that clarification.
No, thank you for the question.
Yeah, and just to clarify with staff on that, I'm guessing that
I had the
in
same
Washington
thought.
State legally they're not mandatory reporters, or we wouldn't need this bill. But it sounds like you guys have a policy of
Our
that.
policy is
Right,
that, you know,
right.
all clergy, not only clergy, but our volunteers, even anybody who has contact with youth and vulnerable populations, we consider them mandatory reporters.
Wonderful.
We consider
Thank you.
them
Just wanted to clarify.
that.
Representative Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, Father. In our discussion of the
This is
House
the
version of
villain.
this, which we considered some time ago,
This guy sucks, as you will see and are seeing. This is kind of the one guy who really seems to be on the side of the churches, which is quite gross. You know, I think especially as you hear the testimony later and the way this guy tries to dismiss it. I just really wanted to poison the well on Walshy boy here. You know, really not a great run for people in the political sphere with the last name of Walsh.
we discussed a bit about the chilling effect that breaking the seal would have, and that by breaking the seal in confession, we might work against the public's interest in bringing perpetrators out into the public.
Who watches The Watchmen,
sir?
sir?
Effect is a likely outcome.
Oh, absolutely.
And expand on that, how it would affect the likelihood of bringing a wrongdoer into the light?
Well, so in terms of confession, people, when they go to confession, they're carrying with them a lot of grief.
So this whole part is really gross, but this argument that he is about to make is also the same argument that Watchtower uses, which is that the elder arrangement, for witness purposes, it has to be a place of privacy and confidentiality, because this is people carry this burden, and it's so unburdening for them to be able to confess knowing that there won't be any consequences for their action. So this guy's argument is basically, you just don't understand how great this is for the pedophiles. It's so good for them. You don't understand how great it is. So yeah, this is the argument this guy's making.
A lot of hurt. Sometimes it's just sort of the normal stuff, like, okay, I might have said a bad word to a spouse or something like that. But, there's people come in and you find out as a confessor that, people aren't as happy as they seem, that they carry with them a lot of burdens, and they need some place to be able to share that, their guilt, their hurt, in a way that they know it's not going to.
Yeah, this is okay. So Ron PIMO points out his argument is that this will cause no one to confess sins anymore. We are seeking to remove the privilege in the one problem of CSA. Yeah, like his argument is that they confess to us because they know that it won't be reported. So if we remove this, then they won't feel comfortable reporting it to us. Doesn't make any sense. No, it just doesn't make any sense
to be shared anyplace else. It's something that Jesus commanded his disciples to do.
Jesus, we're just following Jesus, guys.
Sacraments of the church.
He would have never
liberating.
snitched on any
as a priest,
kind of abuser,
and they pour it all out. And then I'm able to give them the love of Jesus, and I'm able to share the mercy of Jesus with them. And it's a liberating moment, and it's beautiful.
I'm able to give them the love of Jesus. Let's experience that again.
I'm able to give them the love of Jesus, and I'm able to share the mercy of Jesus. And I'm able to give them the love of Jesus, and I'm able to share the mercy of Jesus with them. And
pretend I zoomed in on him.
And it's beautiful, and that's why I'm a priest. That's why I did it, to be able to share God's grace in that way. It only works if people know that they can go in and without fear and be able to share the deepest recesses of their hearts, so that we're able to forgive them.
Won't someone please think of the pedos?
With fear that somehow, what they're saying, could end up being come to light. And so it's hard to describe the Catholic, imagination, but it's one of our 7 sacraments of the church. It's very important for us to be able to share that sacrament of reconciliation.
The sacrament of snitches get stitches.
To do as part of our religion. Makes sense. And so, yeah, there would be a chilling effect.
Thank you. If you're willing to,
it is chilling to listen to him. Yes.
Thank you, Chair Sin. First of all, Bishop, thank you so much for being here today.
Happy to be here.
This
Thank
is, I'm sorry you weren't here when
that'd be great. Yeah, it was really great.
You would have been able to answer a lot of these questions. I grew up in the parochial school, and so I get confession. The question I have is, if you were to hear this in confessional, is it policy, or is it love of your fellow man that you might talk to that person outside of confession about the issue?
Yeah, priests do. They encourage very strongly that they talk to them outside of confession, so that then they become mandatory reporters and are able to, and also we, to encourage, counseling, that kind of thing. I tell people, if they broke a crime, if they
broke a crime,
they turn themselves in as part of restitution.
Wow. He really turned it around on him. What he does is he's like, you should turn yourself in. And that'd be a really good system if everybody who did a crime just turned themselves in. I don't know. I think this guy's making a lot of sense.
I'm clear with that. And, the reality is that it's behind the screen, people with that kind of thing, they won't even go face to face, so
How do you
we
follow up with them if
won't
it's
know who they
anonymous
are
then?
anyway, but, they'll hear my my voice, telling them to, make this right. And so, turning themselves in.
Which you're not, what we're not getting in the, hearing setting is the tone of his voice. Like when he says it, he really means it. He really gets them to turn themselves in the way he says it with his tone.
Make this right. They'll hear my my voice.
They'll hear his
telling
voice.
them to, make this right.
They know their master's
So,
voice.
Turning themselves in. So, does that help?
Actually not, but
Okay. Right.
but the fact that I'm sorry, follow up.
What if we just, by the way, everybody, all emailed Jim Walsh? Does any enterprising person in chat want to look up Jim Walsh's email? It should be on the governmental website-inator.
The fact that in the confessional you will ask them to do these things that they need to do, because you don't see who they are, then you don't see them afterwards outside a confession.
Unless they come to me.
Unless they come to you.
I'm curious about this too.
How often does that happen?
Oh, this kind of grave sin, breaking a crime, in the last 23 years, just a handful of times, 2, maybe 3. I mean, most people are,
I only
coming in
covered
and
up 2 or 3
confessing just
crimes, Your
that
Honor.
normal hurt and pain that people experience, broken relationships, that sort of thing, that they want God's grace. It's more things of that nature. I'm here for you. I'll set up shop.
Needs a screen, I think.
In fact, my first confession was actually a drive-through kind of experience. Yeah, I was just a young priest. I was in Chicago.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I actually can't deal with him
Confession's a
just
drive-through confession.
chumming up
This
the
is a
crowds. Too
very
gross.
season.
Okay.
And their hearts
Oh,
are
we're
breaking
criminals.
about. That's when we're at our best. Yeah.
Thank you. Representative Taylor?
Hate to be the Debbie Downer here.
Yeah, this person rules, by the way.
Are there
Debbie Taylor, is that her
instances
name?
where someone is making a confession and is continuing to harm the child? That it's clear that this is an ongoing pattern of abuse that they are engaged in. It's not
First person to bring up children in this entire thing. First person to bring up the actual children who are being abused.
oh, I did this 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 1 year ago, and the behavior has stopped and they're confessing now. I can imagine that there's a lot of people who are coming to you as a priest to confess, and they, even with the confession, they need to be held accountable because they're continuing to harm the child. You have no obligation to do anything.
Well, I thank you for the question. Just refer
Oh, he
back
thinks so,
to
for
my
that.
experience. I can talk about me in terms of my experience as a
You're
confessor.
a leader.
Yeah, I am a leader.
You
Yeah,
mentor
but
other priests.
absolutely, yeah. And I'll tell you what we tell them.
She is not having his shit.
But in terms of me, there's only been like a couple times in the last 23 years. It's been behind the screen, and so I don't know who they are, but I tell them, to turn themselves in. It's. In terms of what we tell priests is that we encourage them to tell each person who comes in with that kind of a thing to them after confessions.
Don't, when you go out there, Bishop, try not to bring up like pedophilia or abuse. Just call it like one of those things or something, to kind of make it seem like it's not a huge deal what you're advocating for.
Counseling is, particularly important when we can't see them on the other side of the screen. Some people just don't come in front of you. And so we want them to come talk to us outside of confession. So then we're mandatory
100%
at that point.
Oh,
or if they go to a counselor, then
hopefully they'll come to us, again later so that we can then report them.
That's the best I can answer.
After they've had more time to hurt more people.
That's what you do, but that's not necessarily policy. My
That
question
whip
is,
pan.
given that your experience with this is very limited, even within your own faith,
Jamila
how
Taylor.
does this apply in other faiths where the confession is not anonymous or is used and abused on a regular
She's
basis,
reminding him that
where,
other religions
there's
exist.
a reason why we're here.
Sure, I hear you. I can't, I'm not knowledgeable of other faith traditions. You know, I'm a bit.
I'm
Catholic,
unaware that any such
born
things
and raised, and
exist.
so I don't have much interactions with other faith. It'd be an interesting question to ask them.
Oh, it'd be interesting.
Thank you. Representative.
Who cares
Dent,
how
and
it affects
then
other
Or to
communities?
yourself, and then we're going to move on to the remaining testifiers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So
Yeah, it kind of seems like he got thrown
we
under the
passed
bus,
it, let's
huh?
say we passed it, the governor signs it, so it becomes law, and quite we do those things, but sometimes the general public doesn't necessarily have a real, they don't pinpoint on what we've just done, they just generalize it. So my concern would be, we do this, and I just want your honest opinion, because I'm kind of sitting on the edge here.
I hear you.
If we do this, it doesn't mean that the average person walking down the street is going to totally understand that they can still come to confession, you know, without jeopardizing something. Okay. So do you think that this could perhaps stop someone from coming to confession because they don't understand what we've done here and don't understand what the law might be? Or do you see an avenue for you to maybe communicate?
Why would that be
those things to
bad?
the people in the Catholic Church?
I don't understand why this
Well,
would be a
sure.
bad thing.
I'd go back to maybe that second to the last point. You know, just you know that over the history, priests have been martyred and imprisoned
Oh,
for refusing to break the seal of the confessional.
don't worry.
And
He is called
for
out
the
on
love
this
of our people, we won't
nonsense
you know,
later.
People, actually, we talk about. You might be thinking in terms of a priest's right to the seal. No, this is the right to the seal of the confessional is for
Well
the
said.
1 million Catholics in the state. They have the right to the seal of the confession, so they're able
Oh,
to come
it's their
and
right.
confess their sins, unburden their
It's Catholic
you know,
Americans.
whatever's weighing heavy on their heart, and receive the loving forgiveness of Jesus without fear of the government. You know,
Jesus.
subpoenaing the priest.
It's all.
So
It was just
that's what we're
Jesus.
talking about.
This is what
Thank you.
Jesus
Representative
told us to
Ortiz,
do.
Last question.
Following up with some of the line, I'm trying to reconcile.
I like
the
her
love for
too.
the child and the love for the person.
Aha.
The child that's being damaged. Do you
Care? Do
and
you care about
mentioned
children at
religious
all?
freedom of religion? Do you feel then that all religions should have the right to not report child sexual abuse or malnutrition or physical abuse? I mean, should this just apply to priests, or should it apply to every religion?
We see ourselves as mandatory reporters in every single arena.
They see
other than
themselves that
the
way.
confessional. In terms of other religions,
fancy
you know,
themselves
maybe the
mandatory
Washington State
reporters.
Catholic Conference representatives, you know, have more to say about that. You know, I'm a Catholic bishop. I'm a Catholic pastor, so I can't really speak.
Well, no,
about
I
that
just
yeah.
mentioned because you mentioned
But yeah,
freedom of religion.
we expect any of our employees, volunteers, to be mandatory reporters.
Not her
That
question.
is our policy, and so and we do a lot of good.
He might not
particularly with our
know
Safe Environment
if
program
other
ever since
religions exist.
2002. It's been an earthquake for the church.
To be fair.
And so we've done our every effort to up our game and be leaders in this. So I can't speak to other faiths. I'm the Catholic Church. So
Thanks very much, Bishop, for joining us.
oh no, thanks for this opportunity, and God bless you. And I'll set up
Yes,
shop right
yes. This is the
Thank you.
key thing, right? Is he's basically saying we already do mandatory reporting, and the government is saying, okay, so we can make it law then. And they're like, no. It is all about. Somebody said this in the chat. They're advocating for self-policing. They just don't want anybody interfering with their shit, and that is also Watchtower's position. It's all about control. With religion, you know, Watchtower, especially being a high control, high demand religion, they want as much control as possible. So that's what he's advocating for. And there's also this
Thank you so much.
sleazy guy named
Mr. Vice
Eric.
Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we could have Eric up next.
Just
and then
Eric.
Right after we'll have Christina. Eric, whenever you're ready, please go ahead. And again, you have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Eric Niffen. I'm here
Oh.
today as a fellow with the Ethics and Public Policy Center, a think tank in Washington, D.C. I'm also a civil rights lawyer. SB 5280 is a good
He's
bill, but
also
it would be a mistake to
a
amend the bill
creative
and try to force
skater
priests
in
to
Tony
tell
Hawk's Pro
people,
Skater 3.
to tell the state what people say in confession. Based on recent conversations, I'm concerned that members of this committee might not adequately understand the mandatory reporter law as it stands today, as well as the practical and legal effects of trying to require clergy to violate their religious vows. First, the mandatory reporter law already recognizes a lot of privileges that have been called somewhat loopholes by some people. RCW
Correct.
244430B incorporates RCW 56060 into the state's mandatory reporting law, taking rules about testimony in court and using them to limit people's obligations as mandatory reporters. This committee should understand how broad these exceptions are before it takes steps to intrude on
A
the sacrament of
ghoulish
child
alien,
support. Second,
this man.
it's important to understand why our Constitution and laws recognize privileges.
Oh, yeah.
According to the Washington Supreme Court, because some relationships are deemed so important and cannot be effective without candid communication, courts and legislatures have granted them privilege.
I don't know if you heard, but
This
he
includes
did
some
introduce
issues
himself by
raised
saying that he's a
clergy
part of a
clergy
think
positions.
tank.
Finally, these
That's how you know you're going to be
provisions
getting the
by amending bill,
best
as discussed, would be
research
unconstitutional.
available.
One test
Specifically
courts use
partisan
to see whether a restriction on religion is
research.
constitutional is to see whether the government is equally zealous in restricting similar secular activities.
Yeah, this guy sucks.
example,
This guy's
Clinton safety
so
is
his
really
argument. I might I'll fast forward a little bit maybe, but his argument is basically that hey, why are you impeding on religion specifically? It's not like you force lawyers to mandatorily report crimes, which is a strange comparison, but that is essentially his thing. I don't think I missed it, but he's going to say something. He's going to pose a challenge. I challenge thee, he says, to find an example of such and such. And my little PIMO answers the challenge later, so I want to get that.
If the prison will allow beards for medical reasons, it has to make exceptions for religious beards too.
So stupid.
And the same is true here. Government can't say it's good for lawyers to keep confession secret for secular reasons, but it's illegal for priests to keep confession secret for religious reasons. That's why no court has ever approved government invasion of the sacrament of confession.
I don't think that's
Before
true.
this committee votes on Friday, I challenge you to cite examples. When has the seal of the confessional delayed or blocked Washington from knowing about child abuse? Similarly, why would you attack this religious privilege while leaving secular privileges intact? For more information, please see the public comment that I submitted on
JW.org. Yeah, so that was the challenge. Let us get to the questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I wanted to hear
I'm going to ask you a
Jim Walsh's
variation,
bullshit.
same question I asked the bishop. My interest in a potential chilling effect of breaking
I'm very
the
interested
seal
in
of confession
chilling.
is not spiritual. It's worldly.
Oh,
I'm concerned that by breaking the seal, we discourage
very
wrongdoers.
interesting for this man to use the word worldly in that way, don't you think? I didn't catch that the first time. That's very strange. I don't even know of maybe I'm wrong, but I tend to think of that as a JW specific term. Maybe other religions use it.
From fessing up first to themselves and their confessor and eventually to the public what they've done. Do you have any thoughts on how breaking the seal would put a chilling effect not only into a person's spiritual redemption, but into their process for going public with their wrongdoing?
Sure. I think the bishop is better to speak to this than I. I've listened to priests and bishops, and so I received from them like their thoughts on this.
Certain bacteria are more
I
qualified to
think
speak
it's
than
true
you.
that
Okay, I think we get it. We get the sense of this guy, right?
Really evil deeds hide in the dark.
Let's get to the
And
good guys.
Being able to just say out loud what you did is
constitutionally to where this thing's going to get struck down. And that's why I'm asking what other states do this, because I've heard anywhere from 0 and I've heard up to 12. And I'm not getting the right information, because if what we're about to do is just going to get struck down later, this is a massive waste
I
of
was
time.
wondering the same thing. I mean, he
you.
got asked.
On the
The alien got asked at some point, like, are you specifically affiliated with the Catholic Church? And he was like, no, I don't think so. But like, yeah, no, he totally is.
Question: do you know of any information about
I've
other states?
seen a few documents indicating that well, there was a 2015 document put out by the Children's Bureau of the United States indicating that there were 3 other locations within the United States.
So the guy lied. There are other states that do it.
Required reporting of child abuse and neglect by clergy and.
Representative Taylor?
Yeah, let's hear Representative
In terms of mandatory reporting, we heard testimony today that mandatory reporting could be to police, but could there be other entities that mandatory reporting could be made to, such as CPS?
Yeah, it's law enforcement or the Department of Children, Youth, and Families.
And is it possible, Madam Chair?
Follow up, thank you.
And is it possible to make a report anonymously?
It is.
Oh.
Thank you.
So you could still report it anonymously. Huh? Okay, so yeah, the place this guy works for, My Little PIMO, has a quote. We serve as a prominent reference point for governmental officials, members of Congress, and journalists seeking to understand the social doctrine of the Catholic Church. And the guy literally lied. He literally lied and said he did not work for the Catholic Church. Good gravy. Okay,
Mr. Vice Chair.
so now we're going to get to the good guys.
Thank you for your testimony, Eric.
And
Next up,
this
we're gonna have
first woman up
Christina
is
De Leon.
fantastic.
Christina, whenever you are ready, you have 2.5 minutes.
Not hashtag not my
Please introduce
Christina.
yourself to the committee and go ahead.
Also, I don't think that's her name.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm Christiana De Leon, also
Christiana.
happy to answer questions. I'm a Black Diamond resident and a board member for the Association of Secular Elected Officials. ASCO is a nonprofit that is an extension of what it means for people in government to do the right thing for the right thing's sake. Guided by experience, community.
See, this is immediately doing the right thing for the right thing's sake. You know, this is what nobody, this is what only Representative Taylor brought up, really. And the one other person there whose name I keep forgetting, she's got the dark hair, she's kind of older. Somebody remind me of her name too. And they're the only people talking about children. And until the activists here show up and remind everybody of the actual human beings involved here, I think it was Orient by the Sea pointing out that they were, you know, I think these entities can get lost in the tradition of law and politics and such, and forget that this is a very, very human fight for very basic protections for children.
Compassion, and reason. We are about crafting laws and policies that step in where our individual and social flaws fail us. That's why I'm testifying as other today on this bill, because there is nothing sacred about child abuse. To know abuse and to do nothing.
Be dangerous and do
know
both.
That abuse.
No,
we must pass this bill, but if and only if we amend the bill to close the loophole, and it is a loophole, allowing abuse to continue to fester under the guise of exemptions for confessionals and similar religious activities.
If I didn't make it clear, what they specifically don't want is an amendment to this bill. Like what the religious leaders, they're fighting against this amendment that would make it clear that clergy had to report. And importantly, and I do believe I forgot to mention this, thanks to My Little PIMO and Ron PIMO and other people in the chat, the wording specifically includes elders. The wording in the amendment includes elders because they provided evidence to the lawmakers that this is historically how Watchtower gets around reporting. Is they say, we don't have clergy, we have elders. And so there you go. Pretty cool.
I thank the representatives, including and particularly Representative Taylor, who worked to close this gap and dangerous loophole in the companion bill. We must thoroughly demonstrate that there are no exceptions to protecting our youth. If we do not get this bill right the first time, we will be signaling that we are okay with certain times when we can provide cover for abuse that carries a lifetime of trauma. We're hearing so much about people coming with heavy hearts. Now imagine it's children. Washington State will be failing in our duty as elected representatives for all Washingtonians, including but not limited to children who had no say in the religious practices of their caretakers, and certainly not in the abuse by the people who they were supposed to trust the most. We heard testimony.
I really like that point that she just said, that, the children haven't even consented to being in the religion in the first place necessarily. That's something that gets lost in the shuffle with this. We see it a lot when Watchtower gets its feet held to the fire. They want to make it seem like it's only, wizened adults who get baptized, when it's children who were coerced and they didn't have informed consent.
Of people who grew up wishing that more had been done, including by their church, when they were being abused. We need to listen to these impacted people. There are already 13 states, including West Virginia, with laws on the books that demonstrate that adding this condition of no exceptions, including of penitent clergy privilege, is still aligned with First Amendment religious rights, to say nothing of how no exceptions to mandated reporting is clearly in line with a child's basic right to safety. There are, however, plenty of states that have stories of horrific if-onlys in the news, most notably this past year, one in Kansas, that involved a cover-up of abuse that included 188 clergy members. The result required a much more heavy-handed approach from a, mind you, conservative attorney general. This could have been avoided far more proactively had the right laws been in place. Let's be more proactive and join the states who value the true safety of children in their adults' care. Let's not wait until we have a shameful legacy to address. Please pass SB 5280, but we should only move forward with the exemptions language being removed. Thank you. And again, I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much.
What a killer 2 minutes.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Next up, we're going to have Mark O'Donnell, and on deck, we'll have Christopher Marino Harden. Mark, whenever you're ready, please go ahead.
So Mark ends up going last. I think the order ends up really working out,
Mr. Vice Chair,
for our favor.
Christopher in the Zoom room right now.
Great. We can get started with Christopher. Christopher, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
All right.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone.
This is our boy. This is Smile at your boy. This is my little PIMO. He did give me permission to say that, by the way. I'm not just blowing up his spot. And yeah, so he had never, he's been PIMO for a while now, and but he's showing his face because he's been, instrumental in this legislation, and this is something worth fighting for. So it's just, I don't know, it's really inspiring to see, man. Like I watched this and felt like, I literally watched this and started writing emails to independent reporters, because I was just like, oh man, I gotta do something too. I gotta get off my ass and stop just making videos where I make people do funny voices.
This is Christopher Marino Harden. I usually go by Marino. I am currently a Seattle resident, but I spent most of my life in Spokane, as well as my entire life as a member of Jehovah's Witnesses. I was not an abuse victim myself, but I was a whistleblower in the Investigate West investigation, and I've been asked by several abuse victims and their families to speak up on their behalf.
There you go.
As well as some who are...
So as we read at the outset, that Investigate West piece, that bit of reporting, he was a whistleblower who made that happen, who helped make that happen. And now it's gone from that. It's gone from him just emailing local reporters trying to generate interest to this. It's so cool. And it's just so nice to see, that you can make a change on a local level, and that stuff starts adding up. And I think we're seeing that throughout the U.S. right now. I think this stuff is starting to weigh heavily on Watchtower.
And many of these are concerned about repercussions from the Watchtower organization, which I will likely face myself for my appearance here.
Very good point, by the way.
I'm very supportive of this bill. We know from many case examples in many states and countries that clergy mandatory reporting has positive effects, just like it has for doctors, for teachers, and for therapists. It's not a restriction on clergy. It acknowledges an elevated position of trust over children, and it resolves moral and ethical issues that can lead to the bystander effect. I think this bill is good for everyone and may have prevented many of the abuses that I've witnessed. Any bill is better than no bill, but I'm really concerned about the paragraph dealing with clergy penitent privilege. I believe that it undermines the purpose of the entire bill. If the concept of mandatory reporting is to eliminate the bystander effect, then I believe that this exemption codifies the bystander effect. The wording of the bill exempts the reporting of any confession that a clergy member is required to keep secret under their doctrine, discipline, tenets, or customs. In this example, Jehovah's Witnesses customs, and according to their written rule book that elders must follow, all internal investigations are to include a panel questioning with multiple clergy members to be recorded in writing, sent to the branch, and kept secret. This broad wording lets any religious organization adjust their policies to require that all investigations be kept secret as part of their tenets and customs. Confession from the perpetrator, third party, request for help from the victim, a panel interrogation, all of these in Jehovah's Witnesses or Scientology can be couched as a confession, and now the victims cannot subpoena the documents to make their case in court. Eric Niffen before me gave testimony that frustrated me. He asked for a challenge. He asked to see an example of a case where the state was not able to get information because of a confessional privilege. I can give you multiple. This strategy is commonplace for several churches. Kakert versus Watchtower in Montana last week had this problem, and they denied subpoenas for the documents that have full confessions in them. Eric also avoided answering the question from Rep. Couture about whether other states have introduced this amendment. There's at least 6 others, including Texas, that explicitly disallow clergy penitent privilege as grounds for failing to report child sexual abuse. New Hampshire, South Carolina, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, West Virginia, Guam, and Texas. Australia, the UK, and several other organizations have commissioned independent studies and all concluded that no exemptions was the best policy.
I do want to say, by the way, this is amazing for a few reasons. First of all, because he's on a 2-minute timer, he's cramming in so much, and also, I mean, unless I'm wrong, he didn't know what that Eric guy was going to say. So he had to amend his prepared statement and do a quick rebuttal of this guy. This random Catholic lobbyist, and he, conjures all these specific examples that just rip him to shreds. I mean, the Catholic Church got absolutely annihilated here, and Watchtower too, obviously. It's just, I don't know, it's so satisfying to see. This is so good. I'm so proud of my guy.
The bishop who spoke before me invoked history of priests being martyred and imprisoned, but when we look at this history, when we look at bills that exist, we're not seeing mass arrests of priests. These concerns are hypothetical and do not reflect reality. I respect the steps the Catholic Church has taken to improve their standards, but I fear they're asking the bill to be weakened, and I yield my time. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Marino. We do have some questions. Representative Taylor.
Thank you, Marino. What happens when a person goes to a clergy and confesses that they've been victimized by a third party? Is the clergy then still prohibited from reporting?
This is such a good question. And this is such a, I think it really highlights how this particular representative is one of the few people actually asking about the victims. And this is a really good question. She's asking what happens when a person who is a victim of abuse goes and tells the elders, and by proxy tells the clergy. What about the abuse victim and all this? And this is such an important question. And Marino nails it here.
Then still prohibited from reporting?
Yes. So in the Jehovah's Witnesses, there is a guidebook that gives them instructions, and the instruction specifically just says to call the branch for further instructions. There is no explicit prohibition from them reporting it, but there is also no requirement that they report. And there is a culture of not exposing things that puts the church in a bad light. So it is incredibly rare that a person will.
Really important to bring this up. The cultural element is something that's really hard to, nail down in some kind of written thing, which, you can always nail Watchtower on hypocrisy. You can always count on them having said the opposite of whatever they're going to say in court. But the cultural thing is tricky. And I think him bringing up the fact that there is this culture of not bringing reproach on the organization is really important, and something that could easily be glossed over.
Do that on their own volition, that a person will go ahead and do that on their own volition. Mark O'Donnell, who is following me, is actually a former elder and can likely speak to that better. But the policy is that of secrecy and calling the branch for further instruction.
Mm-hmm.
Follow-up, Representative Taylor.
Thank you. So the exact opposite situation could happen where a victim has a chilling effect around reporting abuse that they're experiencing, knowing full well that the clergy won't do anything, including a person who is part of the congregation where they have control, power, and resources to ostracize or do whatever their process is with that individual. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, I'd say that's a great way of explaining it. And there's definitely a chilling effect already in place. There's a lot of cultural and written policies that punish members who speak out against the church. It is an offense that can be punished with shunning to speak against the church in public. So because of that culture and knowing that they may be punished because the church has a no tolerance rule essentially on sex outside of marriage. So frequently a minor may be punished the same as an abuser for having sex with an adult. In fact, one of my friends who I shunned for many years as a believing Jehovah's Witness, I shunned her because she was removed for that reason, and she was a 14-year-old. This happens a lot. So the victim fears confessing because they may be punished.
Thank you, Marino. And trying to form this into a question.
That's such a, it's really powerful. There is absolutely, and I felt this when I experienced, what I now consider sexual assault within the organization. I didn't want to go to the elders because I knew that what had happened would be considered sexual immorality. And so that there was a big chance that I would get in trouble, even though, something that happened to me. And so this really is it's a huge problem. People don't want to come forward to the elders sometimes because they fear repercussions. And yeah, it happens. People get disfellowshipped, specifically, most often women, sometimes girls, teenagers, get disfellowshipped for sexual immorality, for their own sexual assault or rape. It's actually, it's horrifying. Yes, very big victim blaming culture. And if you've ever seen the actual documents that they have to fill out, they consider sometimes that the victim is a willing participant. They're horrible. And JB points out they instill fear in you from a kid on to speak ill of anyone or anything, even if it's wrong. Yeah. Kind of keep it in the family vibe and really, and keep it in your head, if you think it's going to stir up divisions.
So what you are sharing are actual instances of this happening versus hypothetical concerns that others have expressed that this may happen. And it sounds like you have that there's specific instances where this has happened. This is not theory in the religion that you're familiar with and affiliated with, or formerly affiliated with. Is that accurate?
Yes, I could provide you with multiple examples within Washington State, within Spokane alone, at least a half dozen to a dozen, depending on how you define the parameters. So this has happened here multiple times, and this is just within my community. And we have very well documented cases of this happening nationally, and multiple court cases around the country where the states that have this privilege allow the priest to abuse it because they can simply claim everything is privileged.
Yeah, I want to shout out this comment from Samantha. I shudder to think how many people suffer in silence, having been abused and fearing speaking up or doing anything about it because they believe they will be punished for it. And, we see that even in secular society where, within Hollywood or just within day-to-day life, people don't feel like they'll be believed. They fear the repercussions. And so that's why statute of limitations laws are a bad thing for sexual abuse too, because then it locks off like, oh, well, you waited too long to report your abuser, so they're free now. And this is another important point from Patrick here. You can report, but you are looked at negatively for bringing reproach on Jehovah's name. Yeah, it's kind of like you're going to a worldly institution to solve a congregation matter.
And without access, the states that have this privilege allow the priest to abuse it because they can simply claim everything is privileged. And without access to that information, without access to their written investigations where they questioned the perpetrator and the victim in a panel of at least 3 men. They have that all in writing, but the court cannot summon that, and they cannot prove that it should not be privileged because they can't get access to it.
Thank you very much.
So
Any additional
good.
Questions, Representative Walsh.
Man,
Thank
he's
you, Madam
crushing
Chair.
it.
And just to be clear, your experience is limited to the Jehovah's Witness
This
Church,
fucking
correct?
guy sucks so hard.
Yes, my experience is limited to the Jehovah's Witness Church, and I know Scientology and a few other religions have very similar policies, and so I respect that the Catholic Church has taken great internal steps to improve their standards, but my concern is that they're trying to weaken the bill, which will affect religions who have not taken the great steps that they have taken.
What a fucking graceful response. And it's like, I would have just been so annoyed at this guy for being dismissive of like, what do you know? You don't know anything. You're just a Jehovah's Witness, right? You know, this guy is clearly a supporter of the Catholic Church. But Marino brings out a really good point, which is that, you know, it is true. The Catholic Church has had to make a lot of changes. They obviously still have a ton of problems, but they have, you know, had to make a lot of changes that have improved their situation after they got called out in all the spotlight reporting. So Marino points out really smartly here that, you know, that's great for them, but this is going to make churches who haven't done that do the right thing. You know, Watchtower, if they're not incentivized to report, they won't. So yeah, I would have, I don't know, just told this guy to fuck off. This is why I'm not invited to these kind of hearings.
And so that is the reason that I feel we need to target the lowest common denominator and have a consistent law. At the very least, it should be amended to dramatically reduce the scope of what counts as privileged. But I think that we have proof from Australia and the UK studies and multiple other states' examples that the policy works best when there are no exceptions.
Thank you. Follow-up?
And just to follow up, while you have opinions about the Catholic Church and Scientology, your only direct experience is with Jehovah's Witnesses.
That's just
correct?
like your opinion, man.
Correct. Yes.
Thank you very much for coming forward, especially with even with your concerns, your own peril. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Mr.
good on
Vice
this lady for calling out
Thank
the
you,
fact
Madam Chair. Our
that
next-
Marino's
our
taking a
last
risk
testifier
by
today is
doing
gonna be
this.
Mark O'Donnell. Mark, if you could hear us, please go ahead.
I think that not Mark comes up next. I think
you're
that.
on mute. Oh, there you go.
Okay, are we unmuted?
Oh, wait a
Yes,
minute.
please.
Did I?
Yep.
Okay. good
Hang on a
afternoon, Madam
second.
Chair and
Hang
members of-
on a freaking second. I didn't realize. Did I miss? Oh, is a part of this removed from the Ron PIMO YouTube page? That's okay. But there's a good part that we haven't seen.
of the committee. My name is Mark O'Donnell. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, and I'm here representing myself. I'm an advocate for survivors of child sexual
What?
abuse and reporter of.
Oh wait, so he is on before this particular part of the video starts. He's earlier, I think 7 minutes. 7 minutes earlier to what? First link in the description, bro. In my own description, I thought I clicked that. Well, yeah, hang on, because I want to close out with Marco. I've made a critical error. Quick pause while I figure out what I'm doing with my life. Okay. I don't understand. I am playing the video. Sorry for the silence. I thought... God dang it. There's also a delay with StreamYard's chat, so now I'm pulling this up. Okay. Makes great radio. Yeah, sorry. Oh man, I was just thinking to myself, man, this is going so well. We really haven't had any big technical issues, and this isn't a technical issue. This is just a me issue. I don't understand how I missed it. So if I just scroll through the video, then I should find it, huh? Oh, I see. I fucked up. I thought I knew what the hell I was doing. Let me make sure I got the right thing here. I did. I totally messed up. Oh man, I'm so sorry for just like edging. Oh, I see what you said. I'm so sorry. I feel okay. First of all, called out, and this is very true. It's like being at a meeting and the sound guy messes up the video and we sit silent for 3 minutes. Ah! It's true. And you know what? As the frequent sound guy, that is my experience. I feel like I've just been edging Ron this whole time on complete accident. So that's my bad. I just started our like stream part of the video a little too late. Okay. I want to go back to this anonymous person from earlier. Okay. I thought Ron meant the link in my description. I was like, what do you mean? This is the link in my description. I'm an idiot. Okay. Let me share my screen again. Want that? Oh yeah.
If I could have Bishop Schuster come up to the desk. Mitchell, whenever you're ready.
Yes, and you can hear me?
All right, yes. This is...
All right, my name is Mitchell Malini. I'm speaking as a constituent from Ellensburg, Washington. Up until last week, I was recognized as an active member of the Jehovah's Witness organization. I officially resigned as a member, in part due to learning of the policies and decades-long pattern of mishandling allegations of child sexual abuse within that religious community. I was never a victim of CSA, but I am in awe of the brave survivors that have found the courage and strength to speak up about the abuse they experienced. I am ashamed of the faith leaders and adults in these children's lives that should have prevented known child abusers from harming them and others. I commend the Washington state lawmakers that took action and brought forward these bills.
So, I should state then, because I messed up the order of things, he went on first, and then later Marino, and then last Mark. So he's really kicking things off, and his statement is so powerful. I sense getting perhaps a bit emotional even. It's I got emotional listening to it earlier today. He, as he just said, he was a witness until last week. And it's because of exposing issues like this and being able to kick off the discussion like that, acknowledging that people who speak up even just about the fact of the abuse, who aren't even victims, can be shunned. I thought this was really good.
After reading reports on the gaps our state law has in child safeguarding, I support this bill as it will do much to close these gaps. However, I urge you to reconsider keeping the confession exemption, or loophole as it more accurately should be described. It is important to recognize how the Watchtower Corporation, the governing authority over Jehovah's Witnesses, and similarly insular faith communities use these confession loopholes to excuse themselves and their elders from reporting predators in their congregations. The policies that Watchtower lawyers continue to argue in courts is that any and all communications a congregant has with an elder fall under clergy penitent privilege. This means that even a child reporting their abuser is to be viewed as part of that official confession process. And in fact, it has been understood in some cases that a child would be viewed as reporting their own sin of being abused. When a victim of CSA makes an allegation against another member of the faith community, this starts an internal investigation by...
And this is something that, I'm sure a witness watching this would be like, no, it said right there in the Watchtower that, the abuse victims never at fault. And it's like, well, it's nice for them to say that in writing, but in practice, elders are just some fucking guys. They're not special. They're not being guided by Holy Spirit. And they sometimes do blame these children for their own abuse. Because whatever the written policy is, well, it can be abused, misapplied, ignored, and every step of the way, Watchtower is going to try and throw elders under the bus, but they're also the ones who are telling elders, don't call the police just yet. Call us first so we see if you even have to, because you might not have to. And it's on Watchtower's own forms that they categorize, they allow for a category of victim who is a willing participant. So it may say one thing in the Watchtower, but all of the actual practical application of all this shows the exact opposite. So yeah, really, really good on Mitch here for saying that. And I'm saying that because you were literally introduced that way, so I think it's okay.
Elders. They make detailed notes and fill out official forms with details of the abuse, and often, after confronting the abuser, obtain a confession of the crimes. These forms have been described by some law enforcement and legal experts as if they were detailed police reports. This information, the Watchtower organization will fight in courts to withhold from those seeking to justice for the victim. The policies and practices continue to demonstrate their priority of placing brand, image, and even rights of predators above the protection of children within the faith community, and also does nothing to protect children outside the community. These organizations need to be forced to alert the proper authorities to dangerous predators.
This is such a good point. And, now that we've established this is the first thing that he said, it's actually really interesting to watch all the rest of this and realize that nobody else in this entire thing brings up the fact that this allows predators to prey upon people outside of the religious community. It's not like if there's a witness or Catholic abuser that they're going to keep it within the religion and the religion will just handle everything. Like, no, that person has to exist in society, and they're going to have victims who may be outside the group. This is for the betterment of everybody in the state, in the country, not just the religious leaders.
Please do what you can to correct these gaps in our law and make Washington State a leader in protecting children from predators within faith communities. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mitchell. Appreciate you joining us today. Thank you. And
okay, I'm going to fast forward now to Mark, but it was really good. And I think, between our three protagonists here, like, they really cover all the bases, and they're doing it in really short, like 2-minute increments. And so far, I don't remember if they ask Mark any follow-up questions. So yeah, these guys are just doing the actual Lord's work. I'm going to grab a tissue for myself because my allergies are really bad, and I'm going to let this play.
Please go ahead.
I think you're on mute. Oh, there you go.
Okay, are we unmuted?
Yes, please go ahead. Yep.
Okay, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Mark O'Donnell. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, and I'm here representing myself. I'm an advocate for survivors of child sexual abuse and reporter of criminal and civil child sexual abuse cases within the Jehovah's Witness Church. I'm here today to support Senate Bill 5280, but with comment. Children must be protected by the authority figures in their lives. Church elders and ministers are their authority figures. 2 days ago, I was contacted by a woman from Washington State who disclosed that she obtained internal documents from the Jehovah's Witness Church detailing the barbaric rape of a 4-year-old child that took place hundreds of times. Jehovah's Witness church elders are instructed by their legal department in New York not to report such crimes to the police.
Sorry, my allergies are bad today. What I think is so good, like, I don't know, I love the order that this all played out in, because obviously Mark is so knowledgeable and eloquent, and he brings all these really specific examples of like human stories after we've covered the basis of like what the policies are and why it's bad. again, reminding everybody that this is like a really bad problem that affects children, and there's no need to have this thing in place. The only reason why you would do it is if you're a fucking freak who just really loves religion. I don't see how you could argue that a truly compassionate human being could argue in favor of like, no, but we should, keep clergy penitent privilege.
Particularly in states where clergy mandated reporting does not exist. They maintain a permanent database of these crimes, which is inaccessible to law enforcement. Although I support this bill, I would like to challenge the legislature to remove the exception for confessions made to members of the clergy. While I respect the desire of persons of faith to confide in spiritual leaders, the safety of our children far outweighs the confidentiality of a confession.
Yes. I wanted to shout out, I forgot to say this earlier, but I really liked Mitchell's, he threw in like, let's let Washington State like be a leader in child protection. I thought that was a really good bit of politicking there, because it's like, what one thing I kind of skipped over, there was a lot of back and forth between the lawmakers there, and one of the people was kind of, he was asking, and we saw the response, like, have other states done this? Because if this is like going to get struck down by the Supreme Court or something, this might be a waste of time, and which is very stupid. And I think that it's a good appeal to them to be like, well, wouldn't it be great if our nation was like, or if our state was like #1 in the nation at something? Like, wouldn't it be good if we led the nation in something? Like, that's a good appeal to lawmakers. I thought that was very clever. And then, yeah, Mark putting a very human face on all this and reminding people that it's just not worth it. I'll rewind it a little bit to hear the last thing he said. It's not worth this obscure privilege because anybody can make up a religion and just excuse themselves from consequences.
Remove the exception for confessions made to members of the clergy. While I respect the desire of persons of faith to confide in spiritual leaders,
Mark.
The safety of our children far outweighs the confidentiality of a confession. Churches can defend themselves. Children can't. Such exceptions serve only the interest of the abuser and the church, not the victims. We cannot permit a chilling effect on law enforcement. In 2006, Jehovah's Witness elders in Crystal Lake, Illinois, extracted a confession from an abuser who was molesting his 6-year-old daughter. The law said they must report. But because of the exception for confessions, they were told not to report. As a result, the victim was raped for 12 more years until she finally came forward at age 19 on her 19th birthday. Her father was immediately arrested and sentenced to a 50-year prison term. 1 year ago this week, the elders involved in that case who didn't report were found guilty of violating the Mandatory Reporting Act. And in his verdict, on March 18th, Judge Mark Gerhardt said that while the state cannot define one's religion, I still agree that religion cannot define the state's statute. I urge Washington to pass this law, but to remove the loophole that will radically weaken this bill. So I want to thank everyone, and I'm available for questions.
Thanks, Mark.
Fabulous.
Any questions? Representative Taylor.
I don't know if you're able to answer this question, but I did hear in previous testimony about practices and efforts that loop in other activities into the banner of confession within the Jehovah's Witness and other religious orders. What's to keep religious orders from redefining their activities to be under the confession
Nothing.
Yeah,
You're
this is such a
asking
good question.
Very, very important question. In fact, when I met with prosecutors in Illinois for the trial of these two elders who did not report, one of the things they said to me is that the way that these laws are constructed is that anyone can create a religion and start that religion, get a 501c3 tax exemption as a religious organization, and they could just make up their own rules as they go. They can claim that anything is a confession. So the problem with the law that we see it now is that while you do have this added language that says in your new proposed law,
am I crazy, or like didn't like John Oliver or a show like that, just to see if they could do it, like register as a religion, just to like point out that anybody can do it? I might be wrong. Somebody in chat help me out with that. But that seems like a real thing, right? I mean, it is a real thing. Anybody can just establish a religion and alter these rules to skirt the law.
That says only confessions are exempt. If it, I think your law is written in such a way that it says that if it's negative in nature or something outside of the confession, then that would not be included in the exemption. But so the problem is that with the Jehovah's Witness Church, the Mormon Church, and other churches, which I have examined extensively, what they will do is classify anything they desire as a confession. So if they hear, for example, a confession from someone, they can launch an investigation, and outside of that confessional, they can say, well, you know, what you've told us.
Yeah, if you want to watch it without commentary, the link's in the description to Ron PIMO's channel, where he's got the feed that I'm watching.
Us, or what we've heard, is part of our confessional arrangement. It's part of our accepted church practice. So this is the problem we have, and I agree with Mrs. De Leon and her position on this, that it creates too much of a problem when you add this confessional exception to the law. So you're correct.
Thank you. Follow up, Representative Taylor.
So in short, you're essentially saying we need a bright line rule that applies across the board to narrow how folks are defining what a confession is for this purpose, for mandatory reporting. Very narrow purpose.
Yeah, you know, it's just extremely difficult to manage all of this. And I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that children are our first priority. A church can always defend itself in a civil or criminal court. Priests can get lawyers, elders can get lawyers, but a child, a vulnerable child, cannot. And I think it was mentioned earlier.
He's so good. Isn't he great? That's such a good point. And it's such a simple thing that I wouldn't have thought to say. But yeah. So what if a religion, has to defend themselves in court? They can afford to do that. A child can't. It's so good. I mean, he's a good fella doing good work.
By someone else that, within the Jehovah's Witness Church, even victims are held accountable for having sex with an adult. And all of that is kept confidential. They can be disciplined by the church, but I know that's not the subject of why we're here today. But it's a very slippery slope, and it's a very dangerous thing to allow any organization to conceal the information, documents, anything that deals with child sexual abuse. As I mentioned earlier, millions of documents have been collected and stored in a large, both legal and spiritual database among the Jehovah's Witnesses, particularly in Washington State, where there has never been a broad-scale clergy reporting law. So the number of cases that are likely to come forward are significant. This information should not be concealed from law enforcement, but it should be revealed to law enforcement.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mark. Mr. Vice Chair, are there any others wishing to testify?
No other testifiers, Madam Chair.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, that's basically it. But man, he closes it out so strong. I was just so impressed with this whole thing. It just like I was saying at the outset, it can be really daunting when you leave the organization to wrap your head around the idea that human problems are actually humans' problems that like we have to solve, and it's not there's not going to be a deity that intervenes on our behalf. And even if you're somebody who's still religious after leaving, I think you understand that like the way that witnesses ask people to not get involved in politics is very different from other churches' stances, right? And so I feel helpless a lot, and I feel like, what's the point of doing anything? The man's got his boot on our necks. But I think this is just such a great example of how whistleblowing and like doing stuff behind the scenes, so like literally doing the opposite of what I'm doing. That's one of the reasons why I've never felt comfortable with like the term activist for this channel, because I always like, my dream that I wanted to accomplish after leaving the witnesses was like being in like an entertainer. Like I like to create funny and informational videos. And so I don't consider this activism in anything other than like maybe signal boosting something. But this kind of thing, like actually sending letters and emails to like reporters and lawmakers, like it can actually do stuff. And I don't know, I always hear stuff about like, call your congressman, call your local whoever. I'm like, why the hell would I ever do that? They're not going to listen. I don't know. It kind of seems like sometimes they do. So this was so cool. And, people putting their lives on the line, so to speak. Marino's, he's not been disfellowshipped. I don't know why I call him Marinos. There's only one of them as far as I know. But, he's totally putting himself out there, but for like an incredible cause. And, I thought we could close this out with, while I'm signal boosting stuff, that like super representatives is the word I was looking for. Thank you, Ryan. And yeah, this is what activism is. Yeah, while I'm signal boosting stuff that like kind of, if you're like me, like hyper online ExJWs you're probably already aware of, I thought it would be really fun to read Ron PIMO's story of how he got disfellowshipped because it's amazing. I got a couple super chats. I appreciate it. I've just been behind on chat and stuff. But yeah, I think we should read this, right? Because it's amazing. And if I may, Robert Hendricks is somebody who I covered on a stream a while back. I'll have to see if it still exists somewhere, because I should post it on the channel, especially now that he's been promoted to this like crazy position in the public information department. Robert Hendricks is the media spokesperson. He's somebody that like, weirdly, a lot of us as ExJWs are aware of this guy, but most witnesses probably wouldn't be, because his role is to like go on morning radio shows and like weird like local news programs. If they're writing some fluff piece about witnesses returning to meetings after COVID, they'll get him for a quote. So he's kind of their public facing guy, but he's a really weird guy. And there is a stream where we kind of just like looked him up and watched all of these really weird videos with this Robert Hendricks guy. And just out of curiosity, I'm going to pull up jw.org and see like how much Robert Hendricks is even on there, because I think compared to a lot of these folks who are on the broadcast a lot, he's not really on there a lot. Yeah, right. Like I literally searched his name, and unless I spelled it wrong, which I don't think I did. No, I spelled it right. He's not on the freaking website ever. It's like, did you mean someone else who we do want you to know about? But yeah, anyway, Robert Hendricks is a really freaking weird guy. And if you are online, Ron PIMO, obviously an alias, has done a lot of incredible like leaking and whistleblowing on the public information department. And this Robert Hendricks guy specifically, he's a nightmare. He is, I mean, for Watchtower, like, yes, he's their dirty little mistress that they keep on the side. Like he has these very, very successful companies that frankly sound like scams sometimes. He's been in like legal battles before with his company. But he's very, very rich, and it's clearly not taken the vow of poverty that other Bethelites have taken. So Well, and he's also a fairly recent Bethel guy, right? I think part of his thing is that he kind of seems to have risen up fairly quickly. I think he's always been a witness. He's been around and is noteworthy because of his worldly credentials, but I think has only been recently promoted to Bethel. That might be wrong. So double check me on that. I'm going off of memory, but Ron PIMO, I think, has the coolest disfellowshipping story ever, which is that Robert Hendricks apparently has a lot of time on his hands to be worried about what people online are saying about him. And it's also a fun confirmation that some of these people in Watchtower do monitor apostate content. Like, I don't think the governing body does specifically, because they're all old as hell, except, I guess, for Gage Fleeg and the other guy. Brought in 2019. Yeah, okay. So that's what I thought. He's a newbie. So, okay. With Ron's permission, of course, I'm going to read a little bit of this story because it's really good. And I want, this has something like 600 upvotes on Reddit. I want it to have upwards of 700 views on my channel. The world needs to know. And by the world, I mean few dozen people who watch this. So here, he posted this on Reddit, which you can read for yourself. And he has some Twitter posts about it as well. So he says he was planning on quieting down and continuing his fade after some big events in my activism, if you can call it that. I would say, yes, you can. I felt like I accomplished something, and I owed it to my wife and myself to start spending less time on JW/ExJW things. But I guess I embarrassed someone and bruised his massive ego. He had to take action. If you want to know why I pissed off Mr. Hendricks so much, take a look at my post history relating to the PID. I'm not entirely sure how he did it, but Hendricks and his Bethel goons somehow tracked me down. Maybe I wasn't as careful as I thought, but maybe they put some real effort into finding me. Shortly after I posted about PID information, my Ron LinkedIn profile got some interesting visitors. One for sure I know works at PID. If you don't know LinkedIn, you can see who looks at your profile, which is interesting. Imaginary Bethelite Ron has worked at Watchtower for over 89 years, according to LinkedIn, but I've never actually been some well-connected insider as people assumed. Just a guy tired of the lies and bullshit. What a badass statement to make. Yeah, so he's getting some views. Back in February, right before my first birthday celebration with some good friends, I got a call from two elders on the phone together, firmly telling me that they wanted to have a meeting with me at the Kingdom Hall. I asked why, and they said that they were concerned about me and that it wasn't normal for me to turn down a shepherding visit or invitation to join an elder on a Bible study. I have also never returned to in-person meetings and was rarely logging into Zoom. This call caught me off guard and made my heart race. This, when I was reading this, I get flashbacks sometimes to when I was called by the elders, and I was similarly at a really nice, I was having a nice evening. It's one of the, I think it is the last time I really hung out with my sister. So 2 years ago. And it's I kind of knew that I was going to get caught at some point, and I got called there, and just the way your whole body just seizes up. Even though yeah, I'm going to get caught sometime, it won't be a big deal. When it happens, oh, fuck, it feels so bad. This is the first time I had ever received a call like this. It was different. I knew that two elders on the phone was not good news. I feared I had been found out. I tried not to say too much to them, but I did end up telling them I appreciated the concern, but I said it probably comes a few years too late. One of the elders, my friend of 20 plus years, said he understood what I meant and was sorry for the lack of anyone showing us the proper love and concern before now. They knew they should have done better. I like that. It's so true. They so often, I don't know. It just what congregation actually keeps on top of shepherding the congregation? I've never heard of it happening. I told them I would have to get back to them about the invitation to meet at the hall. I didn't respond for a few days or a week, and then finally sent a text declining to meet with them. I'm 99% sure that Watchtower/Hendricks had figured out my general location and asked the elders to go on a hunt for the wicked apostate among them. okay, this is where I'm going to make things about me as as it must be stated, it is my channel. And so I am required by ego to make things about myself about every 2 minutes. But this has always been my suspicion for what happened to me, because I've never gotten a story that makes any sense. I've gotten like 3 conflicting stories on how I was found out. None of them make any sense to me. And what I suspected was, once I showed my face, I think that, I don't know if there's some like metadata shit or something where they can see like the general location of where you're posting from. I have no idea. But it seems to me like calls were being made from the branch around to different elder bodies. And then elder bodies started calling like my dad because he's like a very prominent elder in the area. So I was really interested to see Ron say this, because this is like my conspiracy theory about myself, but I've never known for sure. Oh, I wish we could get that extra 1% so we could just know. We need one of these hound dogs to wake up. Then I did something really stupid, totally stupid. I called the branch, PID specifically, to ask some questions. I used a burner number. Then I did something really cocky, and I called Robert Hendricks' personal phone. I wanted so bad for Ron to give me his phone number, but he very smartly did not. I had found it while researching him and looking into his old businesses. He really likes to slap the Hendricks name on things, and he's kept the same phone number. Incredible. Well, I called that number and left a voicemail for Robert. Hi, Robert. This is Ron. Let me know if you'd like to talk. I know, really cocky and really stupid. This post is great. Robert freaking Hendricks himself called the local elders the next week and gave them a recording of my message and asked them to confirm that it was my voice, which they did. Fast forward to a nice Sunday afternoon home, I get another phone call from a number I don't know, and it is again 2 local elders on the phone. They said they needed to talk with me about something serious and asked to start with a prayer. Oh my God, that's so crazy. I asked them to cut to the chase and just tell me what's going on. The prayer thing is blowing my mind. I don't remember that detail. I feel like they specifically avoided prayer whenever they talked to me. They insisted on praying and then proceeded to ask me if I'm the guy on the internet I see why they're doing it. If I'm the guy on the internet that goes by Ron PIMO. Do I know who that is? Have I been calling the branch? They tell me that they got a call from Robert Hendricks, a brother from the U.S. branch office, and he has a recording, and they all think they know it's me. Holy shit, I just denied everything and played dumb. What is PIMO? Who is Robert Hendricks? The one elder says he knows my voice, but I just deny. This was so 100%. Oh, bye, Jenny. Thanks for hanging out. And when I got called out, I immediately lied. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, which is so stupid. And I called the elder back like half hour later, like, hey, I lied earlier. I don't know why. I was just scared. Sorry, again, had to make it about me. They read some scriptures about Jehovah already knowing everything. Oh, you love that. It seems like Jehovah knows things a lot more when he has a recording of you. Then they invited me to a judicial committee for that upcoming Wednesday evening. I asked what would happen if I didn't want to meet with them. They said it would proceed without me, meaning they would disfellowship me on the word of a guy claiming to be a branch office member over the phone. I've never heard of this happening. So I asked to think about it and responded by text later. I knew I was done. The clock had started ticking. So after thinking on it, I decided that Robert Hendricks doesn't get to control this narrative. I had asked to put the meeting off a week, and they agreed. I started planning on how to say goodbye to my family and few friends. I wrote letters to my family as if it was the last thing I'll ever say to them, as it most likely will be. Oh, man. I made plans to meet with my family, my in-laws, to give them the letters and say goodbye in person. I took days off work and traveled over 1,000 miles by car over 4 days, crisscrossing our state. This was the hardest thing I've ever had to face. So many tears, stress, and exhaustion. Last Tuesday, I said goodbye to my parents. It was crushing. Wednesday, I wrote my disassociation letter to the local elders in one take, and in the evening knocked on the front door of the Kingdom Hall and told them I was not stepping inside. I handed one elder the DA letter. I handed my good friend a personal letter and gave him the biggest hug I ever have, and told him I loved him. Later, I emailed the letter to most of the other elders in our congregation and a few that used to be. I had some things they needed to hear. You can read that letter here. It's really good. I recommend that you read it. called a few more friends over the next few days. I crafted a public notice that I shared on my personal Instagram account. You can see a copy of it here. Over a couple days, I lost 185 friends without a word. There were a couple of very nice messages from good, kind JWs that told me they loved me. A couple PIMOs felt safe enough to tell me they thought my post was brave. I set up my first appointment with a therapist, which is tonight. I'll be talking to them while I get announced as no longer being one of Jehovah's Witnesses at the local Kingdom Hall. Oh man, what a fucking cool story. Oh, but here you go. PIMO's here and on other platforms online. Be careful. Watchtower is monitoring things. I'm not saying everyone that is just seeking help or venting here is going to be tracked down and a great witch hunt is underway. But if you are a big enough thorn in the side of Watchtower, they might take measures to deal with you. So cool. And I really appreciate Ron for sharing this because it is an amazing story, but it's also like, it's kind of like an inspiration for me. I wish I had someone like Ron when I was PIMO, like, because it really is inspiring. Like, hey, like if you're going to go out, do it by being a real pain in the ass for Watchtower. It's really, really cool. And like the stuff that Ron has leaked has like been amazing. It's been like a really incredible look into this new Watchtower department. And it's been incredibly valuable, and it's going to continue to be as they apparently try and be more media savvy and friendly. It's been a long broadcast. Thanks for watching. A couple notes on channel stuff before I leave. I will update this with timestamps probably tomorrow because I have to do some shit tonight. My ADHD has been very, very bad, and I have had a really hard time editing. So I've got a bunch of like interviews and stuff recorded that I've posted about, and obviously like the second part of my video with Christina needs to come out, but it's just like they're all obviously quite long because they're more long form interviews, and it's just like, I don't know, if you have ADHD, you get it. Sometimes there are things that you're just like, no, I can't do that. But I've been really into like YouTube channels that are that have like shorter videos, like Little Joel and Bo of the Fifth Column and TMM, who's a really good atheist YouTuber. And oh yeah, Kevin McFree too. So I think what I might do just as an exercise to myself to keep myself going and making videos is to make some shorter stuff, almost like TikTok, but I kind of hate TikTok, so I'll just post them here. And yeah, so thank you. Please do consider joining the Patreon. It is a big help. And I would like to be able to do creative stuff full time. Keep an eye out. I'm going to be making some non-JW related stuff on other channels. And the live chat was wonderful. Thank you everybody for joining. And thank you to all of the incredible activists on the ground doing work that is actually bettering the lives of Jehovah's Witnesses without them even knowing it. It makes it better for abuse victims. It makes the religion safer, even if you have to drag the religion kicking and screaming into it. So thanks for everything, and goodbye, everyone.